Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Alchemy with Sheeana Leigh. And I am really, really excited and bursting with anticipation because I have one of my favorite humans of all time joining me today on the podcast, Luna. Woo! And Luna is an incredible human. I will invite you in on how we met and our relationship before I hand it over to her. But I love the fuck out of Luna. I think she is an incredible human. She is like family to me now, but we did originally meet by doing the same course. So the same sort of sex, love, relation, Vita coaching. And yeah, we ended up like swapping coaching sessions with each other when I was still like a baby coach, I would say, and learning. And it's really interesting because yeah, I think so highly of her and her level of expertise and attunement and holding and trauma awareness and tantra training. I don't usually let a lot of people hold me in spaces. And yeah, I'm really excited because she is releasing a book that I'm really excited to share around. It is called The Liberated Sensualist, the modern tantrika's guide to embodied awakening. And it's coming out within the next couple of weeks. So celebrating you for that. Woo! But yeah, I actually am also, we've gone from clients to friends to I married her and her partner to working together and all the things. But yeah, I think she's going to be in a really incredible awakening force in the world. I mean, she already is. But yeah, I'm just really excited to see the birthing of this baby and how far and wide it's going to go. And I could talk forever and ever about and how incredible she is. And I'm sure you'll think she is too. So I would like to just welcome you, Luna, to the podcast. Woo!
Thank you. Yeah, and you were a baby coach, but you're amazing. It was such a good school when we got to coach each other in
Yeah,
our
for sure.
relationships because it's always flipping a coin when you're with a trainee. And
Yes,
we were
yes,
like, we flipped well.
we
So
did.
beautiful. Yeah, so I've had a kind of, I guess, unconventional life in a lot of ways. I used to work as a stripper and kink performer, and so I kind of came into sacred sexuality work through like more of the adult industry side of things, more of like the unconscious sexuality side of things, but started tapping on like the power of Eros through that work. Like a lot of sex coaches are ex-strippers actually because there is something like ancient and powerful that you tap into when you're working with the erotic so intimately for such a long time. And yeah, then I was living in Europe and I got into the conscious sexuality scene there and more like conscious kink and stuff like that. And yeah, eventually kind of found myself into tantra and coaching and then like running events, running lots of like retreats, eventually teacher trainings. And yeah, I used to be a bit of a nomad. Like now I'm very happy to be living in Thailand, but I used to travel a lot and run things a lot of places. And yeah, so this book's kind of like, a lot of what I mean, it's been 15 years I've been working with sexuality, like 10 years in the kind of conscious sexuality space. So this book's kind of like an accumulation of like what is the transmission that I really got after going through like the unconscious to the conscious, the underworld, the questioning, running so many events, working with so many people, and like then also going through a huge spiritual awakening, like with traditional tantra and going like very deep into that, and then how it all kind of like came together. So um yeah, I'm really, I don't know, it's exciting, and I also feel nervous as fuck to put it out there because like also, a lot of people kind of knew me for running like fun conscious kink workshops and like play parties and stuff. And this is me kind of stepping out being like, actually, this is a portal into like non-dual, deep, complete transformation, really like deep spiritual work and challenging the kind of patriarchal story of what awakening is, which is usually based off the predominant male religions for the last years, and what is actually the more feminine goddess worshipping path of awakening, which is mostly through the body and sexuality rather than through transcendence. So It's challenging a lot of norms and perceptions, and it's very edgy to also, ask like this crazy weirdo stripper from Australia kind of coming out and being like, I'm going to be speaking about non-dual awakening now. and
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm also excited to see how it lands.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to land profoundly because I think it's definitely a missing piece, an element in our work. Because you're right, I do see a lot of transcendence, a lot of like out of body experiences, and what is it like to actually awaken and not. This is something I love about you, actually, and I don't find it in a lot of humans. It's always like from a one extreme to the other. They're not like anchored and grounded in reality and earth and what is actually truly happening. And they always like, I'm just going to perceive it this way and manifest a different but it's like, where's the bridge between the two? And I love that you are so anchored in reality and real and human and revel in it. And yeah, and then we're still on this awakening path, which is what we're going to get deep into today, actually.
Mm.
That whole, what is it like to be a modern tantrika, a modern woman or a modern person in this world, and really anchor into these core foundational, like ancient teachings, with the lens of like trauma awareness, somatic, embodied work. And I think that that is what a lot of people are screaming for. And I feel like this is collectively where we're shifting. Like I've been feeling, and I'm sure you've been feeling, like the collective shift over the last year. And I feel like we're actually really being called now to like to claim our bigness, to step into it and be like, no, like this is my priestess self, like this is it. And this is the, oh, can you hear that car coming through? Whoopsie. Perfect, it was just me. Wonderful. But like claim their bigness and step up into the world and start shaking things up, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I've seen a lot of people saying like, yeah, it's the age of Aquarius leaders coming through, and I'm 5 signs in Aquarius. So I'm like, I'm claiming this Aquarius as fuck. Like, in my book also I go so much into looking at like patriarchy and colonialism and capitalism and how this all like impacts our psyches and our bodies and how awakening and things go, because so much also of spiritual work is kind of like, oh, we don't get into politics. We're just gonna bypass that and just focus on like me and my happy bubble. And it's like, no, like this is not the time in history to be trying to bypass a lot of the realities of a lot of the suffering in the world and how we're all interconnected. Because for me, like awakening is so much about recognizing our deep interconnectivity with all of life, with the earth, with each other, and that's very much what like the more feminine and the more animist paths were saying. It's like it's not, oh, I'm interconnected because, we all have the same consciousness looking out. It's like, yes, that's one aspect of it, but also like on a very real biological level, like we're so in this chain of like cause and effect and impacting each other, and our choices and our actions and how we show up in the world is impacting the whole. And we need to stop this selfish spirituality that's just about like me having a better life and fuck everyone else, and be like, how do we show up? Like I talk about regenerative love and regenerative eros in this, where it's like, how can we use our work of feeling more pleasure and vitality and aliveness as a way that we can then overflow beauty and love into the world and create more, peace and love and all that hippie blah blah, but like in a very real, practical way as well. And to really feel like with every breath and every moment, this sense that we're in this web of life and we're part of this web of life and we're not separate. And colonialism especially has promoted this hyper individualism because it sells more shit. Like you
Yeah.
being a hardcore individual and I need my own house and my own things and I don't need anyone, then you have to buy 50 million times more things. So, it's been sold to us this idea of hyper individuality, and it's just not actually in alignment with reality. And that's why everyone's so desperately lonely and touch starved and depressed and in this like existential terror about how separate they feel because they've forgotten how deeply interconnected we all are, and we've been sold this lie. So yeah, I think that's a really core thread through the work that I do in the book and what I've been like stepping up into. I used to just kind of avoid talking about politics and stuff because it's not very sexy, and people, like just keep talking about orgasms. That's all people want to hear from you. They'll come to you because they want better orgasms, and just ignore the other stuff. But I think a lot of us have been realizing like we can't not talk about the other stuff because it's impacting us every day in every way. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And deeply on a, you know, this is what really irritates me about like the spirit community and the conscious communities. And I think that a lot of people are starting to see and wake up to it now. I've been getting an ick from them for the last few years, to be quite honest, and repulsed by a lot of them because I can't stand that behavior of thinking. I can't stand the complete lack of the macro, right? Like the actual like zooming out and seeing the bigger picture and seeing how we are all biologically wired together. And yeah, if there is a war on the other side of the country, even if you are not consciously thinking it and feeding it and giving it your energy, like your energy is affected by it, right? Like you are actually, because we're interconnected with even the earth. So whatever is happening on the soil and in it is happening to our bodies, and therefore whatever's happening in our bodies we're actually giving back to the earth. And
Yeah.
yeah, people really just think, some people, I'm not going to blanket everybody in that sentence, but yeah, they have this sort of like upper individualism, this hyper individualism, like you said, so they want to like cut themselves off and separate them selves from impact and reality, and just not think about it and be ignorant. And one day, and one way, it's like being ignorant is bliss. Like you
Yeah.
are blissfully unaware, and it's such a different world because you're like just going about your business in life. But it's really, I feel like we're all being called to step up into bigger and better and to speak the things and talk about truth. I feel like truth is a huge thing that we're anchoring in here at this time. Like,
Yeah. And with
yeah,
truth comes like accountability, because we can't be in interconnectivity without accountability for our actions. And, this has been a huge thing with like, it starts with the call outs of like the obvious abuse, but then it's like, where do we start taking accountability for, when we're acting poorly, when we're being selfish? I know it's always a controversial subject, but a clear one was like how we treat when there's illness or viruses around. And we had to talk about this in Bali, and like, the frustration that a lot of people that consider them conscious will spread viruses around willy-nilly because, well, I want to be high vibe, so I want to go to this party, even though I'm infected and I'm going to like make all these other people sick and perhaps even disable someone or even kill them because of them getting this virus. But I want to be high vibe and I want to do it. And, there's just this total lack of accountability and consideration for others, and like, and that often comes from this very independent, isolated mentality. And unfortunately a lot of spiritual people, this is the classic spiritual bypass of using these spiritual philosophies and this, oh well, like oneness, and we're all responsible for our own experience, and la la la, and these
oh,
like,
and the classic, like you called it in yourself. It doesn't
yeah, what
actually,
did
it's not
you need to
real.
learn? It's
You
not about
called this
me.
in. It's not real,
Yeah.
but you've called this energy and frequency in, which I fucking hate on the victim blaming
Yeah.
mentality. But
And
yeah,
like, and just shout out to one of my teacher's books, Near Enemies of the Truth, where he talks a lot about this, where it's like, yeah, there is like some truth in these statements, but it gets so distorted for people's like personal biases that it
yeah,
ends up causing harm for both them and their spiritual path, because they're not actually embodying truth and authenticity when they're believing this kind of stuff, but also negatively impacting others. So, there's all these near enemies where it's like there's a bit of truth, and like, yeah,
yeah.
like your perception does affect your reality, but then like, yeah, people use it for their own benefit to bypass their own work and accountability. So,
Agreed.
so many things.
So many things. We could go on a big tangent on that forever, me and you. Me and you are yappers. We talk about this stuff all the time. One of the things I really want to like solidify in this space that we're weaving to is, even though we're talking about like hypervigilance, I also believe there's like a lack in one way. There's this hypervigilance, but there's also this like lack of uniqueness. Like people are forgetting that we're actually divinely like blueprinted and coded completely differently, right? And like it's
Mm.
kind of like we have kind of washed out other people's experiences because we believe that everything is a reflection of our own experiences as our own perception, which I really want to hallmark, because in terms of like germ theory or like body disabilities or stuff like that, you know, people can really put on this layer and lens, and again, it's like another separation wounding kind of really imprinted in our body of, well, oh, that's not my experience, like that's not true for you. And it's like
Yeah.
we're all different bodies, we're all so unique. Like just because you don't have this experience and you don't have this ailment or this sort of, you know, it doesn't mean that it's not true for somebody else. So in a way it's kind of like we've, yeah, completely separated, and also we haven't separated to the point where we can actually honor and reverence other people's unique essence and soul and their body in this lifetime, which I find is such a mind fuck. Like,
Yeah, it's like, wait, why are you guys so like hyper individuals on this? But then like when I say that I'm like non-binary soul, you're like, no, you're not. You
no,
know,
you're not.
it's
This is
like
not true. This is
individuality
wrong.
doesn't work that way. It's only when
It's
it comes to me
only
doing what
this.
I want whenever I want. And
Like
it's
an
because it's
Abby.
self-serving, you know? People want like they want to believe what's gonna help life feel less complicated and more safe for them. And like, you know, this is why it feels
Oh,
threatening to, you know, to hear from those of us like, you know, I've got like these invisible disability, long-term chronic illness conditions and stuff. And, you know, people want to believe that like, oh, well, that's only, you know, if you're a bad person, then bad things happen to you. So, like, when they see someone who's like doing all the right things and eating healthy and being clean, and then they're still sick, it's a threat because then that could mean like I could be sick at any point, or, you
yeah.
know, like the typical thing of someone that's like repressing their queerness and then they like project on the other person. It's like things that feel like a threat to acknowledge because it goes against what's easy to believe or what they believe will make them safe feels like such a
Yeah.
threat. And you know, I guess that's why like real spiritual work, like I don't want to call some fake and some real, you know, because it's
Yep.
only your perception, but
Yep.
but I don't know, for me the stuff that works, the effective spiritual work will make you, you know, find like that inner safety where you can be with complexity, like in your body and in your mind and in your psyche. You're able to like anchor into the present moment and anchor into this like felt sense of okayness with what is in such a way that you can be with other people's projections and their assumptions and their like weird way that you're like, I don't know, like I don't agree with the way that you're living, but like you do you kind of thing. Like you can start to feel more secure in that in yourself in a really profound way that you don't need to change and fix everyone to, you know, but at the same time, you know, you want to still take action towards trying to make the world a more loving place because that's just like the impulse of the soul to want to make life a more loving, harmonious place. So it's like
Yeah.
there's not just a total radical surrender of like, oh well, everything just is how it is, and just let people do you. It's like, okay, that's one part of the impulse of just accepting what is and being with what is, and like what is includes genocide and murder and rape and all these kind of things. But you know, there's also like, okay, I can be with what is, but I also like feel this impulse to want that, but not out of a place of saviorism or martyrdom, but out of a place of just like genuine love for humanity and for Earth. So that's like the kind of dance
Oh.
that we're doing. And, you know, my book's like really about like, yeah, what is this middle ground of
Yes.
polarities? I was calling it the other day to my husband, I think my work is like the sacred hermaphrodite in a way where it's like, it's grounded, but it's mystical. It's like modern and it's ancient. And, you know, it's like all these opposites and, you know, and it's about being with that tension of like the surrender to what is, but the desire to change. And you know, like how can I honor my like very humid traumatized nervous system and see that I am like infinite and divine and powerful, and like how can we be with both and like be in this kind of constant contradiction that is being human.
Yes, I love that. You know, it's so true though, because I believe you can always really tell the people. First and foremost, one of my biggest things and my core thing is like building your own internal capacity, right? Like I believe that we have a whole world full of humans that have actually collapsed in their inner capacity, right? So they are hyper vigilant. And again, we could go into nervous system and wars and intergenerational trauma, which, is the very realistic lens that we speak on
Mm.
here, the very grounded in reality aspect. It's like our nervous systems are fried. We are constantly feeling like we're unsafe and not we're always on the lookout for threats. That's the way we're actually wired in our brain. So it's no wonder that we're constantly trying to make everybody's like perception in the world around us to match what's happening internally. So we don't have that threat of being like threatened or not safe. But it's all an illusion. It's all a delicious, delicious illusion in one way as well. Because yeah, I feel like that's exactly what it is. People just don't have capacity these days. And like, how do we build capacity to sit in our own internal state? Like, there's so many things going on in the world I don't agree with. And there's so many people's views and choices and opinions that they're really anchoring into solidly at this point in time. And I'm like, so not pulled into it. And I feel
Mm.
like there's not many of us on this path that have actually really solidified and done this work and really anchored into our spirituality and our humanness and really have decided to consciously, because this is a choice, it's a choice point, right? Like we can always choose to just flail about in our spirituality and transcend, which is like a lot of the teachings prior to now have been sort of teaching us to do. And or we can choose to really anchor in and to evolve and grow and like be in our human nature, which is that to grow and evolve and to love and to be creative. Like if we're not in alignment of that, like I truly believe that we're not living in this human reality right now. We're
Yeah.
just existing. And I feel like that is such a waste of so much soul and eros
Yeah.
and love and
It's like, and the
fire.
potential, like
The
the hard thing with
potential.
doing this work is that like you see what the potential can be, when you're
Yeah.
in these kind of communities, you're hanging out with people that have been, meditating and doing shadow work for years. And, like we still have our little like dramas, but I mean, they're kind of like, they'll be like, oh, we got this tension and drama. But like at the end of the day, it's not actually that big of a deal, you know? But
Yeah.
like, so yeah, like, and I guess that's what's been like so the cause of a lot of like deep grief for a lot of us the last years, where there's been like an increase in exposure to like the horrors of the world and like just how fucking evil and horrible like there are people being, just like some of the most depraved, horrific stuff. And it's just like so in the media at the moment and so in our face that it's like so confronting. And it's hard when you're like, wow, like I know what humans can be if we heal our nervous systems and like transform some of this stuff and be aware of our patterns. And, if we like have these kind of tools of transformation of the psyche and the body, like that the ancient yogis have been teaching and preaching for thousands of years, like when we have access to that, we can just be such creative, loving, benevolent, beautiful people and live a very peaceful life. But like, what happens when, we don't have that? And when these systems have really taken hold and people have been brainwashed and they're, in this constant survival threat state. And, it actually affects people's brains. Like I've been following someone that teaches they've been doing a lot of brain studies on like different political ideology groups, and like people actually have basically brain damage from being so in fear all the time and indoctrinated into these behaviors that it actually changes the way their brain works. And, then on the counter, when you're doing a lot of yogi kind of work, then actually, you start like creating more pathways between the left and right hemisphere, and, like the amygdala starts like calming down and your nervous system's more regulated. Like it, it's actually a genuine biological as well as just like an interstate shift. Like they're
Absolutely.
entwined. And so you see what we could be if these tools and teachings and stuff became mainstream. And I guess also, this is the frustration where like so much of the world consider themselves religious, but they're from these like big religions that are so distorted from what they originally ever were, to the point that like they're basically not effective at all. And they're patriarchal and they're, often have a lot of teachings like belittling women and being very like anti-body and stuff like that. And it's like, wow, imagine if the dominant religions of the world, if more people were practicing spirituality and religion, but they were love-based, body-based, um, pleasure and creativity focused. And, if there was like that mass of people, instead of them going to church and hearing about how they're all like bad, wrong sinners, if they were like having an ecstatic dance and praying and like cuddling each other and stuff, and like imagine that. And like, like religion took over the world in, a series of like 1,000 years or whatever. It's like, yeah, imagine if in 1,000 years the goddess worshiping traditions were back and like people were, praying in this way that was just like super ecstatic and beautiful and loving. Like,
Yeah.
we could live in a very different world. So there is like a hope that there's been this reversal and this flip, and that we are coming into a time where women are becoming more empowered again, and these teachings are resurging, and ecstatic dance is a lot of our church that we're going to every week and drinking
Yeah.
cacao, and it's like that is becoming more and more popular. So there could be like very much collective global change if but, we need to work on the problematic aspects of New Age spirituality and a lot of these traditions and, all the cult issues around Tantra and sacred sexuality. Like, if we don't root out those, it's never going to be able to get enough momentum to be taken seriously as a spiritual path. So I feel like that's where, a lot of my calling has been in working with facilitators to bring in more ethics and accountability and like a higher standard, because I'm like, this shit could change the fucking world for so many generations for so much better. But if people are still like, we've still got teachers and organizations that are abusing people and taking advantage and la la la, then like it's never going to gain momentum. No one's ever going to take it seriously because they're going to be like, you're just a bunch of sex crazed pervert abusers. So we need to really like get the integrity level up and get the value system up if it's ever going to have a chance of making the impact it could.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And it's really interesting to see in a lot of spaces, and I'm sure you can agree. And I'd like to dissect it a little bit further because this vision that you're really calling in, anchoring in, and leading in this field of leaders with integrity and values, I personally feel like a lot of people step I feel like ego rules a lot. Like I feel like the people who actually the actually people who have the gusto to step up and to be seen and to witness and lead and are very like business savvy and great on marketing have high sort of individualist slash avoidant slash narcissistic type tendrils within them. And it's, because they're the ones that are willing to sort of step up and do it. So they're not looking at their own shit. They're not looking at their own mark. They're not actually doing the work that it takes to be in alignment with that. And I find that a lot of the people who are in integrity, that are doing their work, and who are looking at their stuff, like it takes I've been sitting with this the last few weeks actually, how much internal work I really do all the time. Like energy wise, like I am constantly transmuting and moving and going through my shadow and going to the underworld and coming back up. And it takes a lot of energy sometimes to just be in this state of clearing a lot of this gunk to be able to step up. And I just find it so disheartening that that's what we're seeing. Like a lot of us that are in integrity, that do the work, that have the right intentions, right? Like that have
Mm,
pure hearted intentions for like, I don't want to do this for me. I want to do this for us. I want to do this for
yeah.
the greater good. I want to do this for love. I want to pour like the calling that I can't say no to inside my being. And I want to surrender to that and really give myself as a vessel. Like we're not stepping up and doing that. And I want to ask like what you think as well, if there's anything you want to add on to that sort of element, because this is your jam as well,
Yeah.
you feel is sort of lacking or not really yeah, in alignment in this sort of field.
Oh God, I could talk for hours on this because
I
yeah, it's such a
know.
thing that the people that come to me that want to learn and stuff are just like the most sweet, kind-hearted, like loving because like the ones drawn to doing a teacher training that talks about trauma awareness and queer inclusivity and stuff. Like, they're the bleeding hearts and they're beautiful humans with such loving intentions, but then also because they're so caring and aware of their effects, then it's like, whoa, this is a huge responsibility. This is like massive for me to like show up and lead others. And like, how do I know that I'm able to do that well? I don't want to hurt anyone. I want to make sure that I'm like, really in integrity. And like when you're thinking about all those things and you're really aware of your effects on others, like it's fucking draining. It's exhausting. Like you're so hyper aware of like everyone in your space and like, are they having a good time? And then you're willing to put in so much more time if someone's like having a bad time to try to make it better. And like that takes up a lot of time and energy. And yeah, and then like selling yourself and marketing, like a lot of us come into this issue because when you are selling and marketing from a place where you're not in your ego, you're not using manipulative techniques, you're not like overselling and, being out of integrity in those ways, like it doesn't hook people as much. Like I can
True.
easily say that like I'm very confident in my skills as a teacher. I get amazing feedback from my spaces and still I can like charge way less and sell way less than a majority of people that like are in a similar range in my field because they're, like, oh yeah, just this and this and this, and you'll be a sex god and la la la. And like because people are traumatized and they're attracted to these egomaniacs because their parents maybe were egomaniacs or, because of celebrity culture, then that's what they're attracted to. So I get everyone coming to me after like, oh, like I really love and appreciate your work and I really respect you. But now I spent all my money on these other charlatans and now can I come for free to your event and stuff? And like it's such a like constant frustration. And it happens to a lot of other people like us. And then yeah, on the other side, then yeah, you got your like overconfident, like, and I don't give a fuck and I'm just gonna bail when things get hard and and they have so much more energy because they don't give a fuck about their effect on other people
True.
or like if they hurt anyone or upset them, they just move on to the next thing and they'll just like get back in their hustle. So it's really a challenge. And like what I've been trying to do is to get those of us that care together and try to get us to like support each other and kind of create like support networks because I feel like the only way that we can be more successful is if we boost each other up. But the issue I'm finding is that people, they're still not really like a lot of the sensitive types are just kind of like, man, I'm just gonna like go in the background or I don't know, and I don't really have any money because I don't work much and so like we just don't have like the momentum, the support, like people aren't as like openly loud about supporting each other compared to a lot of the people in the more egotistical whatever, like there's so much nepotism and like sucking up and people being willing to like, oh my God, you guys are so amazing. I'm gonna tell all my friends so that I seem cool and you seem cool and then you'll like me. And like there's kind of like fawning, manipulative stuff. And like there's a lot more resources because a lot of people like have a lot more money that are in these more like narcissistic traumas. So like they've got the
Yeah.
resources, the energy, the momentum. And like unless those of us that are doing the more grounded, caring work really start supporting each other and like giving resources and energy and lifting each other up, then like we're not actually going to make change. And we see this like in our scene, but also on like a global collective thing, like how the left and right, like the right will like, here's my money and do that thing and I'm going to rally and show up. And then the left are like complaining, but you said that word wrong, so fuck you, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
like we've really been seeing this on a big political level of a lot of the people with the more loving, caring intentions also tend to get into infighting and complaining and tend to have more traumatized nervous systems or like trauma responses that show up in different ways rather than the like the fight energy, and so yeah, there is really an issue. And as you said, like a lot of it comes to capacity. Like we need to build our capacity, we need to build like better support networks, we need to really like put effort into lifting each other up. And, when I've been trying to do things like this, it hasn't actually been working in the way I've wanted it to work or hoped it would. So that's still something I'm milling over is like, how do we crack through this so that we can
Yeah.
lift up the people that are actually going to do really good work and create viable alternatives? But yeah, a lot of the time it comes down to like without money and resources, then it's very difficult. And a lot of us on the caring side just don't have the money and the resources. So
Yeah, agreed. I really agree that, like, and a lot of us who are in this work for the right reasons and not as a business built like money building scheme. Don't get me wrong, we should definitely be um
well compensated for our
compensated,
work. Yeah.
compensated, yeah, for what we put in, because I can guarantee that we put in a lot more hard slug than a lot of other people. We put in a lot more time, effort, energy, right? Than
Yeah. And
uh,
investing into learning so
yeah,
much more because we want to serve people really well.
totally. And we're very sensitive. Like you said, like the more sensitive we are, the more hyper vigilant are, which again sort of crosses over because a lot of the times we have had more challenging, more traumatized like upbringings, which is a gift. It's our medicine for sure. But also it comes with all of these other things that we're kind of like moving through to kind of crack that being safe in community, being safe like in support and in relationship to others without like too much take and not give, like this reciprocal kind of energy, which I think we're just sort of learning because a lot of the foundations and the dynamics that we have seen in society, in politics, in religion, in all the environments, even our family dynamics, have been on this sort of unhealthy, toxic uh, energy where we're not actually being satiated, we're being drained. And then we're needing quite a bit of time to actually nourish and come back into self and feed ourselves before we come out into the world, and be confident in like this is we can show up and we can receive and we can give, and it's just such a delicate dance, isn't it?
Yeah, and like even now with me putting out my book, like it's edgy for me to yeah, be like asking for the kind of support that this book needs because I'm one of these sensitive types. Like, I don't have a big budget. I have a lot of money. I've just spent 2 years writing this thing, which is time that I haven't been able to spend on other projects and stuff. So,
Yep.
there's like now this big desire of being like, okay, like if this is going to spread, like I really need support. And, it kind of feels like, hey guys, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just like make one post while,
Yeah.
while a lot of other people that, are okay with more manipulative tendencies or just, much more confident in being like, I am entitled to everyone supporting me will just be able to like much more confidently
Right.
attract that. And like, there's still this part of me that's like, oh, I don't want to inconvenience anyone. This book could be really good for the collective. And, if you wouldn't mind sharing it, but like, yeah, it's still, there's still always layers of that ick that, I and a
I
lot of others
agree.
are working through.
I find it so hard to ask for support still, even when I'm
Mm.
really struggling or when I really desire. It's such a big edge for me. So I'm celebrating you for doing that. And I can't wait. I can't wait to support you and like get it out there. I really want to ask as well, like when you were writing the book, and what is like one of your so to really like what is one of your key takeaways, what your biggest inspiration, what does that even mean, the modern guide, and how, yeah, just tell us all about like your inspiration, your desire, your intention, and what are the main threads that you really convey in the book. I think that'd be really awesome to sit with
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, at first I'd had the idea that I wanted it to be, about sacred sensuality is like one of the core pieces. And I sat with for a long time around whether I would go into Tantra or not in it, whether I would use the word Tantra, whether it would be tantric or, it would be sensualist Tantra was going to be maybe one of the titles. And yeah, I sat with that for a long time because there's like the imposter syndrome of being like, okay, I've been studying traditional tantra for like 6 years, neo tantra for much longer. Like, it's very much my path. It's what I'm devoted to, but also the word is like heavily appropriated and misused and stuff. And, so there was like a long process. I was, going to my mentor being like, can you just tell me whether I should use it or not? And like, can I just externalize this to someone? And, having like, psychedelic trips and asking the mushrooms and like, doing meditations and asking and being like, okay, like, do I use Tantra? And then it just kept coming up a clear yes, that it's like, because also people always ask me, do you have a tantra book you can recommend? And then I was like, okay, well, like, are you looking for traditional tantra, like yoga and awakening? Are you looking for neo tantra, like better orgasms? Are you looking for partner practices? Like, what do you mean by tantra? Because that word means so many different things to different people, and like the recommendations would be very different. And I found like I was really struggling to recommend a good neo tantra book because so many of them were so inaccurate. Because what's happened with tantra was that for many, it's only been very recently that a lot of traditional tantric texts have been translated into English. So a lot of what has been taught for a long time was based on like a very few random yogis that like did have a bit of, they traveled to India in the 1900s and they learned a bit and they kind of taught some stuff. And then a lot of it more comes from like Osho. And Osho actually wasn't part of a lineage. He didn't have access to many tantric texts either. He like made it seem as if he was really knowledgeable on this, but he actually wasn't. And he created his own neo-tantra hybrid of techniques. So, a lot of what people are teaching is just like flat out inaccurate. So when I started studying with like a historian and a scholar, I started learning about like what the text actually said, what chakras actually are, what Kundalini actually is. And, then I was like, okay, so a lot of the books on Neo Tantra, I can say like, oh, you can read it just to get some info on sacred sexuality, but just so you know, it's completely inaccurate about Tantra. Or I could send people to these very academic, very dry books that are very like, often like beautiful philosophy, but like way too heady and not what people are looking for when they're asking for Tantra. So,
True.
there was a recognition that there was a big need for a book that bridged traditional Tantra and the modern desire for something related to eroticism and sexuality that is tantric, that's a body embracing, life embracing kind of philosophy. So I wanted to create something that fit that need for something in between that has like the real depth and the real like grounded wisdom of tantra, that's not just like some total fluffy appropriated kind of crap.
Yeah.
And but was still like relevant for the modern person, because when you get into traditional tantra, like God, there's just such complex
Yes.
systems and philosophies and all the deities, and like it's just too
Yeah.
much for
People don't
most people.
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, I've spent like 6 years studying this shit, and like, I mean, not to call it shit, but studying this kind of stuff. And
Whoopsie.
I'm still only just like kind of, it's landing. Like a lot of this, if you grew up in the cultural context of being in India, being born into a family where you grew up with these deities and their stories and stuff, then you can relate to them a lot more. But I find for a lot of people, that's not actually what they're interested in, or maybe later down the track they will be, but it's not the entry point. So I wanted to create something that, bridges those kind of worlds and also brings together a lot of what my explorations in the last 15 years of working with sexuality and teaching and stuff have been. And originally I wanted to include, start with like a section on solo practices and then go to a section on couple practices and then go to more like kind of group and stuff. But when I got to near the end of writing the first section, it was a whole book. Okay, it was like, oh, this is already 300 pages. Like, so probably, one of the next books will be more like partner specific practices. But for now, it ended up very much the solo path, which then also goes into ecosexuality and connection with all of life, not just solo inner body practices, but like meditating with a tree and things like that as well.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so I wanted to create something that really felt like a fairly like comprehensive, complete path from like A to B of like, okay, you're numb and disconnected and you're curious. And then like going, all the way through to the path dissolves and you're infinitely deepening into your divine nature. And like, I mean, obviously, that journey is usually like at least 5 years. If you're like a diehard practitioner, usually more like 10 years would be that whole journey. But, I wanted to really like map out like what are these different layers, different practices, different and like the order that is generally recommended, because in ancient traditions you would go through initiation stages. They would be like, you're not even going to learn a kundalini breath technique until you've like done a year of silent meditation on on your breath, like then you can go into this next thing. So I was aiming to really map out like, okay, you really need the foundations first. Like, so the first section is all like these really foundation, like breath and somatic practices, working with numbness, working with like just, really kind of foundational spaces so that you're kind of rooted and anchored. And then you go into the underworld where you're like, okay, now I'm learning like empowerment techniques, energy, body, shadow work, like challenging my thoughts and, working with my emotions and this kind of like, now that I've got like the steady base, then like how do I get into the grid and the psyche and the ego and start to build energy up in my body? Because a lot of people like want to go first to they just go straight into like going to a Kundalini activation process or something. It's like if you don't have the foundations and you try to just like pump a bunch of energy into your body, like that's not going to be a good time. Like you're
Yeah.
going to probably like have a lot of destabilization. So there was a reason to the method that they had in ancient times of like these initiation processes and these like levels that you would go to. So yeah, the second section is all more like the stripping and the shedding and the empowering. And then the third section is more like, okay, how do I like integrate this into a daily life practice? How do I like be with reality in a really like intimate and empowering way and live more devotionally and more surrendered and yeah, these bit more like subtle advanced practices towards the end of the book. So yeah, it kind of it's big because it covers like all these different levels, but I think even like someone that is more at level 3 already would still get a lot from a lot of the nuances that I add earlier in the book. And then, someone that's really new, like the third section is going to be like way too far in advance, but like it'll give them some context of where this can go in the year. So yeah, really the book, like I'm kind of recommending that people just kind of read through it the first time and take what you will, but then like to go back and go really slowly and work through all the practices and to just like, let it be this kind of guide for where you're at in your spiritual path and like what kind of practices are most going to serve you for where you're at right now and the kind of issues you're having right now. Yeah, and I also created a companion course with all the guided recordings because there's about 40 practices in the book. And
Oof.
I know I'm the kind of person that when I'm reading a book and they got the practices, like I always go like Google the teacher and I'm like, do you have recordings of these? Because I hate like trying to read in a book and then try to do it myself. And
Yeah.
it's like just takes you out of the vibe. So I was like, yeah, well,
Agree.
I'm just gonna like record all of them. People can just like buy the course and
Amazing.
do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And one of the biggest pieces that I think is going to be so profound and something that I think is, well, one, that you're doing the audio practices as well. Like that is very rare. And it's something I love so much. Like, when I even started writing a book, I'm like, I'm going to do audio guides with this because I
Yeah.
cannot read them and listen to what they tell me to do. Like, no. But also, I think the most powerful, like the powerful part of all that is really grounded and anchoring in, okay, so I've got all this information, I've got all of these initiations, like how do I anchor that into my daily life? And I think that that's what so many people struggle with, and I think that's what takes them up and out of their body and either
Mm.
go to this path where they're like, transcending and just being in this spiritual experience, because it's like we actually haven't been taught how to anchor it in to the here and now in the modern day. Like how do we integrate these practices? How do we be a modern day tantrika in this realm? Like how do we get up and be devotional and worship? And it doesn't, and we've also been sold a lie of how that looks. Like with the
Yeah.
rise of social media, we see these like guru spirit culture where everyone's dressed in white, but they're living in these like it's I do a 4-hour morning practice before I even connect with another human being, and it's like, well, what the fuck do you mean connecting
Yeah.
with a human being is a spiritual practice? Like what the actual hell? It drives me mental. And
Yeah.
that's what the flavor. So I think that it's really, like I think me and you are some of the most spiritual people I know, but you wouldn't think so. Like
Yeah,
that's
like a lot of people meeting us when we're like shaking our ass to drum and bass on the dance floor and twerking on the ground would probably be like, these girls are so bass or whatever. But, but this has been the big disillusionment is like a lot of the great spiritual masters, we start hearing behind the scenes, they were very fallible. I mean, God, like Deepak Chopra has had like multiple sexual abuse
oh,
allegations and now he's hooked in with Epstein, and you're like, you're this guy preaching, all this
Right?
kind of stuff, and like Osho as well. Like, there was so much dark stuff and child sex abuse and stuff going on behind the scenes there, and like, there's just been this real disillusionment. And the interesting thing when, studying a lot of this, like once you've read a certain amount of spiritual philosophy books and you kind of get it would be very easy for me to like put on a performance, and if you like do this rock star guru thing where you only just show up and you do your talk and then you disappear and you don't interact with any of your students and you're just kind of this mythical figure that just shows up and teaches and disappears, and you don't share any of your life on social media, you only have like a few sycophants around you, like it's so easy to just pretend to be this holier than thou person. And then it's not surprising that when we start hearing that actually a lot of these guys were perverts or like
Uh-huh.
really toxic or aggressive, like beating their wives, like all this kind of stuff, because, they were in a performance. It was an ego performance of what a spiritual person should be like. And I loved one of my favorite books is Passionate Enlightenment, which is about women in tantric Buddhism, which is challenging so many of the stories around how women were in Buddhism, because a lot of people were just like, oh, they were just used in rituals to like help the men transcend. They were basically sex workers. And it's like, no, these were enlightened masters, like the women were often actually described as being very fierce, very intense. They were like so devoted to truth that they would just cut through the bullshit. All these men that are like, oh, women don't know, I'm more spiritual. Like they would just shut them down.
Yeah.
And they were very much described as being fierce and intense. And that's been my experience of being around the most awakened women that I've ever met. They're
True.
intense, fierce, very fucking honest, very like cut through the bullshit kind of people, because you recognize after a while, like, yeah, I'm not fawning anymore. I don't need your approval. I don't actually care what your perception of me is if you're going to think I'm a bitch or something, because that's just your story. But I'm here for truth. And like, I know that truth is an expression of love. And this is what actually my editor, when he was writing the forward for my book, he's just like, yeah, like Luna can seem very brutal at times, but there's just so much softness and love behind the reason for being brutal. But it's just like, no, like, I'm not here for this fake love and light bypass bullshit. I'm here for like the raw, gritty reality of what it is to be a human on this earth, doing the human thing. And they're my people, the people that are here committed to truth and here for love, and, are willing to be uncomfortable in the process, because that's like what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and that's
that's
why
like,
you're my people, Shiana.
yes, you're my people too. It sets me on
Yeah, and she says,
fire.
well, she's got, my little,
Your little koala cutie behind your back. Is it a koala?
yeah, for those listening, I have like a cute little pillow, and I have like fluffy cat toys and stuff. So the fierce yogini also has lots of squishy,
So
cute, fluffy
fierce,
stuff.
you sensualist. But it's so true, and I think that that is something that I have really, like, it lights me up hearing you talk about this, because my intensity and my, like, I would say I cause a lot of friction in
Mm.
other people, and like the discomfort inside of them, I do. And people think I'm wild, like, and I used to be so like timid or shy about that, and try and like contort myself to be a lot more softer and gentle and so-called quote unquote feminine. And the last couple of years I've realized that my ferocity, like my fire, like my passion and my absolute feralness, and like anchoring into that truth it is me being in my full power as a woman. And we've been
Mm.
sold a lie of what it is to be a feminine, to be a woman, and
To be an
I
authority figure
to be
as
authority.
well.
Yes,
Yeah.
so true, and it's so deep, and it's like, well, oh my God. And just like hearing you saying that, it's like, yeah, I'm here for people and their raw truth. Like, and it's interesting because you always see people's like cognitive dissonance when you don't fit their box or you don't
Mm.
fit, and it's only a reflection of them. Like, I've really gotten to a point, and I'm sure you have now too, but you just, it just like it's like water off a duck's back. That saying, like, it doesn't really affect me at all what people think, or if people try and villainize me, or like, it's like I'm so comfortable and anchored into like who I am as a person, and being that fierce like initiator, that it just doesn't even bother me anymore. It's taken me a long time to get here, I'm not gonna lie, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I mean,
know,
I found there's been like the contrast where there's ways in which I'm like, I don't give a fuck, that's your story, that's your perception. But then there's still the part of me that's like, well, I want to be effective. I want to like support more love and connection in the world. And sometimes, I get sad if I'm being a little bit blunt or fierce, online in some comments and people get really triggered, or, people like I'm unfollowing you, whatever. Sometimes there still is some grief just of the fact that it's like, okay, well, like, I'm aiming to be showing up to create more love. And sometimes, I feel a bit sad if I don't manage that through my actions, or, so I'm often working on like, okay, I can just be like radically honest and blunt, but like, maybe there are ways I can work on the delivery so that people are more open to receiving that. But there's also an element of like some people are just where they're at and they're just gonna like hate on you and judge you and be threatened by you just because like that is a complete reflection of just where they're at. Like, I've been having this with someone that like, I don't know, I think he's clearly like threatened by me and just suddenly been making like really mean comments on all of my
yeah,
posts that, and it's just like, okay, like none of that touches me because it's just so clearly like his
yeah,
insecurities and his stuff. But then, there are other times where it's like, oh, okay, like, how can I express myself in a way that, will still be honest and effective, but, be able to, yeah, be received as medicine more
yeah.
often and more likely. So that's the part that I'm working
Sure.
on at the moment.
But it's like a delicate dance, right? Like, it is the
Yeah.
medicine. It is, and that's what I mean. Like, you are responsible for your own actions and your emotions, and not spilling them out everywhere, and like really taking radical responsibility for yourself and the way you show up. But also, if you are incongruent with like truth and love, and
Mm,
you are in alignment with that, and not sort of seeping your wounds out everywhere, and it doesn't have this energy of like wanting to obtain or manipulate, like, you can be secure in the fact that that people's receptivity is part of their capacity, and also be able to hold yourself in that, and with tenderness, right? Like,
yeah.
that's the dance we're doing. Like, both realities can exist, and this is like the juice, this is the circular moment we've come back to. It's like the polarities exist within us, and these like
Yeah.
dual dynamics are all interwoven, and we've been very like, in this society and in this world, it's black or white, it's left or right, it's this or that. And it's like, well, no, like, the earth is so complex, we are so complex, there's so much nuance and elementals within each of us and within everything, that it's like we're actually living in this area of gray, and it's like being okay that they can both sort of coexist, and dancing with that. And I think that that is like kind of where it is, what it is like to be a liberated person, to be a sensualist, to be a tantrika, to be, owning and reclaiming parts of yourself, and taking ownership of that and the effect they have on each other, and also going, I can put all this aside and step up and show up and not be so afraid that,
Mm,
yeah, I'm like, you know, hindering myself, right? And
yeah.
hindering the earth and other people and their evolution and growth. I can,
Yeah.
yeah,
Preach it. Yeah, I think like at the start of my book, one of the things I said was like, for me, awakening was like moving from a two-dimensional black and white reality into like a fractal universe of like infinite complexity. And, that's very much what awakening will do. And,
yeah,
it actually is like a change in the brain and how you're perceiving things from being, yeah, very much like, well, this is pure and this is impure, this is right, this is wrong, this, to suddenly being like, oh, okay, like, there's so much like context and cause and effect and, free will. Is it an illusion? Is it real? Like, there's just so much. And, and this why in Tantra, there was, non-duality, like in Vedanta, which is, everything is just everything is consciousness, everything is connected. And then in the Kaula branch of Tantra, they came up with supreme non-duality, which is that duality is an expression of non-duality. So like the very real, there's you and there's me, and like you did this and I feel this, and you know, all that kind of stuff is like a very real way that we experience something that is one, you know, in its like meta truth, but like actually, but like this real dual experience that I'm having is also truth within that. So it's like it's a bit of a mind fuck to get your head around it, but like you experience it and you're like, yeah, like I'm not going to just bypass what I'm feeling and experiencing as an individual person, just saying like, oh, well, all is one, so it doesn't matter anyway. It's like, no, it
Yeah.
matters. I care. I feel like this is significant and this is affecting me and it's affecting you, and that is real. Like in this moment, that is real, even if everything is like essentially illusionary in nature when you get to the meta uh, quantum mechanics side
Oh
of
my
things.
God, they
You
both
know?
exist. They all
It's
exist.
all
It's such,
real.
it's all real. It's such a mind fuck, like you said. And I think that's what I really love about our work in particular. It's like, it's the micro and the macro and the meta and the, what's the opposite of meta? I don't even know right now. What is it? Do you even know? Meta, meta.
And, uh,
Perfect. So he just
yeah.
just stuffing it up. But anyway, it's also a side note that pretend I didn't say any of that. But it's all about the in like being in body, right? And
Mm.
that is again one of the things that we haven't, like you said, it's like it's true and it's real now. Like I'm feeling this and it's affecting you and cause and effect and this and all of the layers and that, but it's like always coming back to the body and like the vessel of the body, because I truly believe that the vessel is the of the body is our most potent resource on our
Mm.
planet, like our eros, our sexuality, our sensuality, and who and how we feel and digest in our body. And again, that is like building our capacity, right, to do that, because it's not a conversation, and like we can sit here and talk about all of this on a very cognitive, logical, these sorts of text experience, but I don't feel like it really lands and kind of drops in until you're feeling it and letting it move, like that element of truth in your body, which is
Mm.
quite hard to do, right? Because a lot of people, like we've spoken about, like meditation, this, that, and the other, it's transcendent. You don't feel your feelings, you don't feel your body, you're up and out. And yeah, I truly believe that it's like we can talk all this stuff, but it's something that has to be experienced and felt within the body to truly like crack open and like uh the fractals you spoke about, like weave the fractals together so it's more coherent. And I know that sounds so bizarre, but like once you grasp that, then you can like, that's what I think it is. And I think that that's the
Yeah.
like the work that we're doing is like, oh, okay, anchoring in, having
Yeah.
that like multi-dimensional, sacred, divine experience, profane, like human experience, and like weaving them together and then pouring that out is truly what I believe we're here to do in our raw essence.
Yeah, and this is what we call like the path of immersion. It's like it's all about immersing into the experience. Like instead of going up and out, you're like going so deeply within. And you know, one of my favorite chapters in the book is the portal of the senses. And you know, they're very
Oh,
simple, sensual meditations, but it's like you know, for example, one with smelling, you know, it's like, okay, when you smell something, like when is it not you and when is it you? Like when it hits the nose, when it kind of is interpreted by the brain, when your body responds to what you're smelling, maybe a memory comes up related to the smell, and like, you know, also you're giving off smell in your environment, and like, you know, how is the environment like responding to your smell? And, you know, this is where non-duality and this whole like, where do I begin and where does the outside world begin? Like also with the breath, you know, like when you know, is it as soon as it passes my nose or my lips that the breath is suddenly me? Or, like, or is it when it's in the lungs, or is it when it enters the bronchi? Like, all these lines that we try to separate between you and me, like if we actually really meditate through the body and through the senses, we can start seeing that like that separation line that we perceive as like me and not me is like very fucking blurry.
Yeah.
And this is why like yeah, this more, feminine path of like immersion and through the body has been really ignored and not taken seriously. But a lot of us that are going this way, and I've been seeing more, there's a few books actually coming out like around the time that my book's coming out. Like Maya Luna's got one of She is God. I'm talking to a wonderful woman called Cynthia. I can't remember what her book's called, but it's like going to publishing in January. And, we all have a similar vein of what our teachings are. And I'm like, yeah, there's something like energetically kind of coming through of this embodied non-duality path that is kind of coming up again and saying like, yeah, I mean, this isn't a new thing. It's ancient, but it's coming in a new modern way. And it's like, also this other book on these ancient yogini teachings that I was reading the other day, they actually said like in Tantra, they said it was like a tree, the path. And the whole like, meditating on emptiness is the trunk of the tree and recognizing consciousness and the Shiva. But all the branches and all the more advanced complex practices are all the feminine, dakini, yogini, body-based, sexuality-based kind of practices. Like they are the branches that reach out into your life. So it's like a lot of what has been put it on the pedestal of like, this is enlightenment, like Eckhart Tolle talking about, consciousness, like Adyashanti talking about recognizing, like, I've gone through that process. I've recognized consciousness and all that. And I'm like, yeah, it's useful. I recommend everyone does that. I talk about it in my book as well and give some meditations, but like that's just like a kind of foundation piece.
Yes.
That's not everything. That's not the top, and that's what like the Shakta tantrikers knew. Like, yeah, okay, like that, people are putting this on a pedestal as if like that's the end of enlightenment. It's like, no, like from there, once you have that as a foundation, like how do you relate with life and the web of life and eros and passion and fire, all
Yes.
this, like that was actually the more advanced, intricate teachings, which were often taught by females. And, we haven't had very famous, popular female spiritual teachers for a long time. It's been mostly men at the top. And, I feel like we're in a stage where that is flipping and that more females are coming out as spiritual authorities. And, and yeah, we have to work through a lot of our shit to show up and be like, actually, yes, I do fucking know about spirituality. Yes, I shake my ass and I'm a feral bitch, but like I can be a spiritual authority. Why are we only letting, some guys that talk about stillness be the authorities on spirituality when that's not actually also the state that a lot of people even want to inhabit. A lot of people want a more passionate, juicy, alive, like yummy kind of life. And that's what our path is teaching.
Yeah.
It's like you don't just need to be sitting on your mat being like, oh, I meditated in silence for 8 hours. I'm superior to you. Like that's
No.
fine if that's your path. And for some people that's what they want and that's what their ideal is. And like no shame on that. But that's not what a lot of people, what a lot of us want. Like I don't want to just be sitting around all day. I want to be like celebrating and enjoying and dancing with life. I want to be
Yeah.
making love to life. Like that's my path. That's what I'm here for. So that's what my book's about.
Yes. Oh my God. I am frothing right now. It's just like everything I'm so passionate about and everything I believe that's what the way we're moving. That is the way, the tide. And if like you're really sensitive and oracle in nature and tapped into the collective pulse of what's happening, because we're all interconnected. If you didn't know, that's kind of what we're talking about. You will feel
Mm.
the pulse of this becoming louder and bigger and juicier. And it's like, that's where we're going. That's where the tide is going. That's where we're moving into. Like we've had our time of elements of, yeah, sitting in conscious meditation and this, that we've had that. And it's like, there's something still missing. Like that is one flavor. And I also want to hit the point that we are all so unique and our
Mm.
path to our transcendence, our evolution, our growth, and to expressing our unique essence and our love into the world is so vastly unique. And this is something that I literally wish I could scream from the rooftops all the time, because it's like your path is not the person beside you path, because we're like this intricate, I see us as like a little web, um,
Mm.
where we all have our own little elementals, and we're all showing up differently, and we're all like, even though we're like co-weaving and breathing together in this life force web, we have like different expressions. So I really want to like say that. Yes. How you feeling? This was really fun. I could talk to you for
Yeah.
hours
I
about
know,
this.
I'm loving it. It's like, yeah, it's also just really great talking about this now that I've kind of like got to the end of writing this book. And, it feels really exciting to talk about, the meta point of this work. So thank you for like helping me also kind of digest what I've put together
Yes.
and what this is, because, it's like, yeah, it was still emerging as I was writing it of like what it wanted to be. And, like, oh, fuck, I really need to put in a thing around like the witch hunts and how that affects us. And, like all these bits get kind of thrown in. And that's why it ended up huge. Like, usually, people try to say limit it to like 300 pages for a book is a pretty standard book. And
Yeah.
mine's almost 500 pages at the moment. But
I'm
I was
not
like,
even surprised.
I just can't. Like, my editor and I were really trying to be like, all right, what can we cut? And I was
Nah.
like, it's all needed. Like, it's too complex what we're talking about to try to like chunk it down and just like make it
Yeah.
bite size. And I'm a long form content teacher. I don't do
You are.
short little snappy tidbits and 10 top tips for having a more awakened life. I'm like, nah, if you come to
No.
me, like, you're going on a fucking journey.
We're going on a journey. We're
Take you
going
on a journey. I'm not here to give you a little tidbit.
Yes, I know. And that's like something that I'm like, and I love that you've like claimed that and owned that, because it's something that like I am in the, currently moving into like what I'm claiming my bigness, and like I'm not that type of like person that just gives like these little tidbits. I'm like, we're going to the fucking underworld. We are journeying to the deepest parts of your psyche and your soma. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, get
that's
ready
not,
for Kali to rip your head off. If not, go to someone else. If
yes.
you're not willing to bow at the altar of the dark goddess, then I'm not your person.
No, but it's like really claiming that, and that's part of our unique essence and how our flavor and how we are moving through our own like expression of truth and love in this life, which I think is so beautiful. Now, do you feel like that you feel complete? You
Yeah,
feel
for sure.
yeah, beautiful. There's two more questions I'd love to ask you. And the first one is, if you sit with your body and yeah, just see if there's any bits of like wisdom or messages or anything you really want to share to sort of close out this journey we've been on together. And also, what is your one intention or a little tidbit? I know we just said you don't do that. To people who are starting this path, that are picking up your book, that are on this journey.
Hmm. What's any other wisdom wanting to come through? Yeah, I guess it's just, yeah, for me, there was always this part of like trust. If you're on the spiritual path and there's a part of you like rebelling and saying no to like some of the philosophy and some of the teachings, trust that. Because like, I don't know, when I was going to yoga school and when I was like even reading like about Buddhism and stuff, like there was always a part where I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm really aligning, I'm really resonating. There's always a part of me that was like, nah, like this part of me just like fucking wouldn't. And and following that and like getting curious and exploring that took me now to more of the paths where I really felt like yes, this is speaking to my soul. This feels true. Like capital T truth is like radiating from this. And yeah, like I said, I mean, there's just so many different like paths out there. And some people just really like your personality type and your soul calling is like more towards like slightly different traditions. It's not putting like on a pedestal of like Tantra is the perfect one. Like Tantra is perfect for crazy bitches like us. It's always been the path of like the kind of like punks of the ancient days. And and for me I was like, this is my fucking home. Like this is the tradition that works for me, but it's not for everyone. And yeah, what was the last bit again? Second one?
Yeah, is there an intention that you have for anybody that reads this book? So, yeah, what is your hope? What is your heart's like highest calling for anyone that gets this book? Or if there's any like tidbits of people starting out on this journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my deepest intention is just to help people become radically free and, find truth, truth of whatever in various forms. And, that's the thing why like I used to shy away, like liberation just always was the word that like came through when I would think about my work. And I used to like shy away from that and be like, oh yeah, maybe I use freedom instead. But more and more over time, I'm like, no, I'm here for fucking liberation and I'm here for your liberation. And like my work is all about liberation for you. Um, and liberation for all beings in the process of that. So, yeah, if you're here for liberation, then you're curious about all the stuff we've been talking about, then, you're going to get more than a few tidbits if you read this mega book that I wrote.
Yeah. Yes. I really want to say that just even what you shared about if you read this and there's any part of you that's saying no, like listen to that no speaks so highly of you and your integrity and your values and your actual guiding force of liberation for all, however that looks, right? A lot of people talk a lot of big smack in this realm and field of work, and they're like, oh, I'm here for this and I'm here for freedom or liberation or love, but only if it looks this way. And it's like, no. So I really wanted to like just highlight that like if you've listened and you've listened this whole way, which I know you have because it's been such a juicy call, Luna is incredibly, yeah, in integrity, in love, in like high alignment for liberation. And she is one of the very few people in this life that I trust, like, to receive from, trust to be sick with, trust.
Stuck sick in a villa with a flood with.
Just one of those people, and like I can't wait. I'm gonna get this book. I'm gonna share it around. Like it'll be probably one of the guiding books I give out to my clients. I think it's so needed. And I can't wait to see it and your baby. And I know you've worked hard on it. And I'm just celebrating you. And I'm just loving you and so much, so much. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about it.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, thanks to all those listening.
Yeah.
Shauna's
Yeah.
amazing. Had such a
Thanks.
great time getting coached by her and having her marry me. So do recommend.
Thank you. As always, I'm going to put the links for everything in here, how to work with Luna, how to obtain beautiful courses, the book, all of that in the little side notes, of course. And feel free to reach out to either of us and how this has inspired you and how this has landed for you and where you're at in your journey of like really modern day tantricering in this world.
Tantricering.
Tantricering. That's just a word I made up right now. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd love to share? Anything else you'd like to promo before we say goodbye?
No, all good.
All right. Here's to your liberation. Love you. Bye. See you next time.